always said the government is basically organised crime, right? And if you are owning a shop or a business in a street and organised crime comes along and says, look, you've got to pay us $1,000 a week, or so we can protect you from bad things that might happen, right? And the bad things that might happen are from the same people who are offering you protection. But if you pay them, they leave you alone and you run your business. The default state is freedom. The default state is things are lawful until a law gets passed to make something illegal. The speech is free until it's censored. Your money is yours until it's taxed and taken. The idea that, the starting point is tax falls on you for trying to do something different and actually having succeeded. It's almost like you've found arbitrage, you've actually started to win the game. And they're like, no, the rules aren't written for you to win. We need to rewrite the rules so that you lose, literally be in your grave or not even cold, and the tax man's going to be rifling through your pockets and saying that, your kids shouldn't be entitled to benefit from your hard work if that's what you choose to do with your money. And we've been there before. Inheritance taxes used to be the norm. There used to be a death tax in every state in the country, and then Queensland abolished it, and all the retirees and the development money moved to Queensland, and then the other states followed suit within a couple of years.
G'day legends, welcome back to G'day Bitcoin. I'm your host Sean. Joining us today is Jordan Dittloff. This is third appearance. Jordan, how are you this morning, mate?
Mate, I'm good. It's awesome to be a frequent flyer on G'day Bitcoin.
Dude, I've loved watching your evolution. Like the first time I got you on was to talk about the misinformation, disinformation bill last year. When the circus of the Australian election cycle started to really heat up, and at that stage you weren't really into Bitcoin. And I've seen your transformation over that. You were going for the Libertarian Party Senate seat, which you didn't get, but then since then you've been doing some amazing stuff. So what have you been up to since the last time you're on the show? What's taking up your time at the minute?
Yeah, well, the first most exciting thing from a Bitcoin perspective, I guess, is that I'm on route to a self-managed super Bitcoin solution, which is bloody awesome. Yeah, I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's funny because I was sort of excitedly telling you and a few others, and they're like, "Don't tell anyone exactly what you're doing, whatever." So I'm sort of just putting in the work and getting the stuff done. Shout out to the guys at Hard Block, which is freaking awesome. They support. They're an Australian Bitcoin industry member, Bitcoin only exchange, and they support the self-managed super pathway really well. So if you're not sure or you're worried or need help or information, they've got a great company they work with who set up your trust deeds and everything and help guide you through how to set up a self-managed super. I'm a qualified, I'm a law graduate, so I sort of know more about it than most people, but you don't have to know anything for them to sort you out. It's like $1,300, $1,400 for them to set everything up. And then the Hard Block guys will set up an account for your super. So look into it. Not financial advice, but life advice, perhaps.
Maybe. On that note, I've just partnered with you to super fund, self-managed super fund as well. Gday Bitcoin, SMSF. You can find that. I'll put it in the description. But I just wanted to put a real easy company together. They can get people set up in about a month on average, but you can talk to them, free call. You can book in there on G'day Bitcoin and find out. And then pairing that with the Bitcoin way or Bitcoin and self-custody, it's complete. It's the closest that you can have, I think, holding Bitcoin in self-custody in a self-managed super fund when it comes to the traditional super fund. Obviously, they're talking about this unrealized capital gains tax and stuff, and people holding Bitcoin are probably going to hit that $3 million threshold far quicker than anyone else is going to. Yes. But I still believe it's better. Number one, it's in self-custody, so you've got more control over it. There's no counterparty risk to it. It's just how secure is it? Have you learned from the best, or have you put in your research to learn how to custody that? You're running your own node. But then still, if people hit that threshold, it's still better to have a $3 million problem than no money in your retirement account.
Yeah, look, you're right. And it is we didn't end up getting to chat too much about the unrealized capital gains thing at the time. It's still working through the system, but obviously it's just it's no different to a RAM raid on a server or an ATM, or
it's pure theft.
Kids getting out the hammer and breaking the piggy bank when they're hungry for something they want right now instead of saving for the future. There's no difference in behaviour between the way the government's treating the rules of the game they set out that everyone thought they were playing by. They're turning that upending that, and tipping the table over and scattering the pieces everywhere because they want the sugar hit of money now, because they're the ship is leaking and water's pouring in, and they're desperately trying to plug fingers and thumbs rather than fixing the structural problems. And as you say, ultimately at the end of the day, the government is going to steal from you, but you're still getting a massive hedge against inflation. As one of my favorite accounts, Rational Aussie, says, fiat's going to zero. So,
It is, yeah.
at the end of the day,
By design.
Yeah, very much so.
Mathematically, it's not even people are like, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. No, like that's mathematics. That's just the nature of what people call money, the cash that we're getting paid. It's crazy.
Well, it's mathematical, but it's also behavioural. So the structural elements of like a non-pegged fiat are, as you say, that's the mechanics of it. That's what it does. But that's hastened and accelerated by the behavioural dimensions of Keynesian economics and basically the very unserious people who make these decisions. So so it's a mix of nature and nurture, I think, when it comes to fiat, or lack of nurture. But it's definitely and like since the election in particular, the election result, not just for our party but for anyone even remotely approaching common sense at the last election, was a disaster in terms of where our country is at, where the average Australian is at, like where the normies are at, is so far towards the path of socialism and serfdom that, after the election, my mind, because I'm a very solutions oriented person, that was the reason I put my hand up, and the campaign I ran was very much about solutions and like what can we actually do, not just being outraged and sort of like what can we complain about, because that's how that's how the dopamine hit. Human nature is to go, this is terrible, like old man yells at cloud, sort of mentality. But that's just not what interests me. Like that's not what gets me off the couch.
Yeah.
I'm a solutions focused person. And so after the election, where I was like, okay, we've probably got another 10 to 20 years of what I'm calling the socialist winter, like what Argentina had before Malay. That's where we're at. We're entering that, unfortunately. And that's really, really difficult to come to. I know that's really hard to just throw out there casually almost. You just cringe even to think of it. But the reality is, those of us who can see the writing on the wall and understand that it's going to be a case of, like the monastery in the Dark Ages in medieval Europe, keeping the flame of knowledge of the Enlightenment alive. That's what those of us who are switched on and see what's coming and know what will be needed in the long run to solve it have to do. We have to circle the wagons and try to find ways to protect our interests, but also create communities of shared value. And Bitcoin and Bitcoiners are absolutely one of those kind of beacons of sanity that can survive the coming winter, I think. So post-election, one of the things I've definitely gone all in on, and like to the point where a few of my friends have been like, geez, you've gone a bit full on this orange stuff. I'm like, mate, like it's not even a question for me based on what I can see coming and what needs to happen. So it's been like, even though the result was absolutely a disaster and a real metric of how bad things already are and how much worse they'll get, I took a few silver linings out of it, and key among those silver linings was some of the great people I met and some of the awesome communities and I think practical things we can do to make change in our own spheres of influence without waiting for the government or society to change. And I think that's the real key. It's almost like a user-defined victory condition, where we are going to have to redefine what success looks like, and we're going to have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves first, and then once we're sorted out and able to assist others, helping pass on good knowledge and information, and even in time, my new sort of semi-secret project, it's probably not secret if I'm saying here, but I really want to actually create a physical community where we can actually start to get people with shared values, basically circling the wagons and creating that parallel society of shared values, with like Bitcoin being traded for goods and services, communities basically taking care of themselves and trying to actually generate a bit of a critical mass. Like if you look at the Free State Project in America, that New Hampshire, American state in the north of America there, the Free State Project is like a community of libertarians and libertarian thinkers who are basically like flying the flag, getting libertarians and libertarian-minded people to move to New Hampshire so they can then influence the local government and state government there. And New Hampshire now has no income tax, so no state-based income tax. Trump's abolished federal income tax, basically. So there's pretty much no income tax in New Hampshire,
Wow.
which is pretty incredible. And they've got a really forward-thinking. They've got a Bitcoin strategic reserve on the way as well. So yeah, New Hampshire is definitely kicking goals, and I think it will take a lot longer, and it'll probably have to start at more of a micro level in Australia, especially in Victoria. But I think at the same time, Victoria is where it will work because the light shines brightest in the darkness, and people
That's
can see
right.
people can see, look, balkanization and tribalization is happening. Our society is fragmenting, and we can either ignore that and pretend that everyone wants the same things we want and will act in our best interests, or we can start to actually build those communities of shared value.
On that note, have you read the book Parallel by Brian Demant?
No, I haven't, but that's really funny that you would have that on hand. And I'm talking about parallel societies, and
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't read that, but it's just, for me, it's kind of like a first principles logic. The most rational strategy is to, I've always said the government is basically organized crime, right? And if you are owning a shop or a business in a street and organized crime comes along and says, look, you got to pay us $1,000 a week, or so we can protect you from bad things that might happen, right? And the bad things that might happen are from the same people who are offering you protection.
Yeah.
But if you pay them, they leave you alone and you run your business. And the way I am conceiving now of thriving and creating alternatives to the state is basically pay the pound of flesh, treat tax as protection money to a gangster, and then use the space you buy with that protection money to actually start creating conditions on the ground that prove your concept, and then actually give people a vision of what a more free society and world would look like, with sound money, with respect for property rights, free speech, all that sort of stuff. So that then you can actually point to, look, here's this little zone, this kind of oasis or sanctuary we've created where, we're within the state, we're not challenging the state so that they won't sort of react against us, but we're actually using that space and breathing room to sort of make our proof of concept, to do our sort of almost like communal proof of work. So yeah, that's my, I haven't read that anywhere, or sort of, I've seen what New Hampshire are doing, and I've just kind of reasoned through what are our options really.
If you've still got your Bitcoin on an exchange, or you're looking to take your Bitcoin security to the next level, I've partnered with the Bitcoin Way. They offer live help for setting up cold storage, running your own node, keeping your Bitcoin private, planning for the future, using multi-sig, and so much more. They never touch your keys. They will not touch your coins. Instead, they'll show you how to buy and keep them safe. If you want to make your Bitcoin setup safer, you can book a free 30-minute call and have a chat with them. Dina Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunel, Preston Pish, and so many more recommend the professional IT cybersecurity team. Couple of outstanding things here. You can see they've been featured in Forbes, Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Prague, Zero Hedge, Simply Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Safe Dean, the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Dina Moose, Bitcoin News, obviously Gday Bitcoin for a long time. They're the world experts in helping people become self-sovereign. It's not just about protecting your Bitcoin stash. Yes, they will help you do that in a very easy to understand step-by-step process. But from there, they can help you secure your data. They are your personal cybersecurity IT experts. And then step number 3 is getting a second passport, a Plan B residency. The team, very cheap, very affordable for people that are looking to take their sovereignty to the next level. You can find out more about their services. When you first log in to their website as well, they have got a free 3-minute quiz to allow you to check if you are doing your cybersecurity, your setup correctly. I urge everyone to jump onto the bitcoinway.com. I have put a link into the description for everyone. Could not recommend them enough. I've used them personally before I ever partnered with them for the channel, friends and family. They asked me to help them out. I'm like, go to the world experts. That is the Bitcoin Way. So reach out to the Bitcoin Way today. It'll be interesting. Like you're saying, pay the protection money, obviously, that being tax. Was it over the weekend that they had this economic round table?
Oh, it's been happening this week. So it was Tuesday through to today, I think, is the last day of it. And today they're dealing with tax reform. But what they mean when they say tax reform, I can assure you, is more tax. That's tax reform upwards.
Like, as a small business owner, Jordan, like I'm already subject to close to 100 different taxes in one form of another, and even when GST came in, they said this would mitigate other taxes, and like, unfortunately, like, we hand that on to the customer. So they're
Yeah,
paying that
absolutely.
10%. But if they increase it to 15%, that's also going to get handed on to the customer. And then there's other ideas of like taxing both sides of it. It's just like non-stop, endless tax, the capital gains tax discount that you get on the family home and stuff. Um, there's ideas of getting rid of that negative gearing or whatever it is. And I'm not saying I'm in favor for these things
Mm,
or not, but the people that are now changing the rules benefited off these rules. They've put themselves into an amazing position. And like, we've grown up, this is sort of the rules of the board that we're playing, whatever game we're playing. And you start to work towards that, maybe get up a bit of savings or something so they can buy your first family home or go into a second property or whatever if you're playing that traditional finance system. And then just when someone's got like enough money in savings or whatever, they want to change those rules nonstop. I guess, like, what are your thoughts about maybe this roundtable that's going on this week? You're probably a little bit more over it than I have been.
Yeah, well, when you look at the language that the ATO and the language that governments and some of these, they are lobby groups. That's not what they call themselves. They call themselves like, institutes and think tanks or whatever, but they're lobby groups, right? Especially like the
Yeah,
CIS and there's a couple of there's a couple of others like CIS is kind of like okay sometimes, but then there's others that are essentially like I think the Lowy Institute and a couple of others. They're lobby groups, and there's some that are sort of like more right wing, like the IPA. There's a lot that, especially that get a seat at the table in these kind of rooms. Even if they're not in the room, they have a lot of influence over the conversations. And talking about like the capital gains tax exemption on the family home as $50 billion of foregone revenue, like that's the language they use. These people think that the default state is taxation. They think that
that's right.
they're entitled to your money unless they, pardon you and grant you this sort of carve out and go, look how generous we're being not to steal from you. And it's just breathtaking it's in the mindset it shows, that is where obviously the default state is freedom. The default state is things are lawful until a law gets passed to make something illegal. Speech is free until it's censored. Your money is yours until it's taxed and taken. The idea that the starting point is tax is insanity, but it's so entitled. And the reason I mention that is because it bleeds into these kind of policy considerations where they say, well, look, you've managed to hoard this wealth. You're a human dragon. You must have done things that are unfair and it's created inequality. And we need to, you're a lobster that's almost escaped from the pot. We need to pull you back down in. Like what have you done? You must have, your suspicion falls on you. The eye of Sauron sort of falls on you for trying to do something different and actually having succeeded. Like it's almost
Yeah,
like you've found arbitrage. You've actually started to win the game. And they're like, no. The rules aren't written for you to win. We need
that's
to
right.
rewrite the rules so that you lose. That's that old thing of heads you lose. No, it's like heads you win, tails I lose.
Yeah.
Like it's like the cup game where none of the cups have a ball under them. So yeah, I could do metaphors for days, but like that is the nature of the system. And I think that the politics of envy is increasingly destroying our society. Like we used to live in a high trust society where some people had more, some people had less, but few people really fundamentally doubted that there was a pathway to do better and to leave more for your kids than you sort of had for you. And now that's almost like, because they're talking about, I don't think it's actually at the summit, but in the background, the ABC is starting to beat the drums on an inheritance tax. And it's the same thing. You can
Yeah,
literally be in your grave or not even cold, and the tax man's going to be rifling through your pockets and saying that your kids shouldn't be entitled to benefit from your hard work if that's what you choose to do with your money. And we've been there before. Like inheritance taxes used to be the norm. There used to be a death tax in every state in the country, and then Queensland abolished it, and all the retirees and the development money moved to Queensland, and then the other states followed suit within a couple of years immediately. So we had federalism, the states competing against each other produced an excellent outcome. But
yeah,
without that competition, if it's like a cartel, if everyone goes back into inheritance taxes, then what are you going to do? You don't have a state you can move to that until a state gets rid of that. But these days, that would mean getting rid of expenditure and doing things that they don't want to do, because you are being asked to tighten your belt. You have to make the family budget balance, but the government just keeps spending more and more and more and keeps adding not just to the belt. So yeah, it's a really difficult time, because essentially, and this is the other thing, the government now, directly or indirectly, employs over 50% of the Australian population, the adult working population. Like, that's a statistic that is terrifying. And I think even people who are in that kind of ecosystem understand that it's unsustainable. Like, I think at a visceral gut level, Australians understand that more people working for the government than for private industry is wrong. Like, that's imbalanced. And then the last 12 months have seen 80% of all new job creation go towards the government sector, whether that be NDIS, direct government employment, contractors, whatever. So it's 50% and growing. And that creates this huge disincentive to vote against your interests. Like, people, it is increasingly a smaller and smaller portion of society that's having to shoulder a larger and larger portion of the tax base. And then we've got the aging population, so it's going to exaggerate things even more. So yeah, it's heading towards a very interesting place. And I think that these summits and tax reform and so on, they're not thinking seriously, and they're not thinking in terms of sacrifice. And so any solution or any plan they come up with is just redistribution. Like, they're not actually making structural change. They're not committing to slow or stop printing money. They're not committing to slow or stop additional spending. They're not thinking about things to make the workforce more productive. Like, so many of the things you've done, and another thing that you've actually influenced me on quite a lot that I wanted to call out is you said you want your premium YouTube subscription and you want an AI subscription, paid subscription. And I did that when you posted that video, and you've been able to use that to become more productive. You've been able to do things that you couldn't have done before. And that's what AI has the capacity to unlock. But there's so many sectors and so many people still stuck in the mindset that they are entitled to ongoing wage growth without actually generating more value in exchange for that. And that is just going to lead to Australia falling further and further behind. So yeah, Productivity Summit. I think that we might have forgotten what the word productivity means. And actually this week, while the summit's on, I think the next video content I do will be about, like, what is productivity? Actually, what does it mean? And why have we abandoned striving for it?
Yeah, that's right. Because people think money grows on trees. I think the worst thing about this, saying taxing people is effective, it's not. But because they're not willing to rein in their spending in the slightest. Like, they could tax people 100% and Australia's still going to go further down the hole. So so they're just 100% there to confiscate as much wealth, which is freedom, it's choice over mind, body, and soul, really, from people, and then they're just going to keep doing what they're doing, maybe at a slower rate short term. But once they've taken everyone's wealth, then they don't have any more taxes, and they're going to fire up the money printer even harder eventually anyway.
And so a couple of years
sucks,
ago,
man.
It does. A couple of years ago, I think it was might have been the 2021, it was in between lockdowns. I think it was the 2021 Friedman Conference or 2022 in Sydney. Dr. John Humphreys, who's one of the founders of the Libertarian Party that I'm a member of, and he's a very, very smart man. I think you'd love to talk to him. He's brilliant, like one of the smartest people I know, and he's an economist. And he was saying that if Australia simply froze all new spending, so made no cuts, but just literally stopped increasing spending, the budget would balance within about 4 or 5 years, I think. I have to double check the time horizon. Yeah. But he was basically saying, literally, all that would be needed is to stop the bleeding for a period of time, like stop new spending, and the budget, like Jurassic Park, life would find a way. Like, Australia's economy should be the envy of the region, the envy of the world. Like,
we're so resource rich, man. Like,
yeah.
It makes no sense. Like we're some of the highest electricity prices in the world, highest cost of living, highest cost of homes. It's a big country. I understand that it's really only like very, very beautiful or green, like between 100 kilometers around the coast. But it's a huge bloody country and there's plenty of land and stuff. But just all the costs are through the roof because of the money.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, it all starts with the money, but it also starts with like net zero commitments in circumstances where Australia's contribution is far less than, I think it's like 0.3% of global emissions or something like that. It's like a tiny fraction of a
Yeah,
percentage that our contributions make. And even if we were to just cease emitting altogether, it would make no difference to the world at all. You don't need to believe or disbelieve. You don't need to have a position on whether climate change is real to know factually, statistically, that nothing we do makes a difference. When you've got China opening like 12 new coal-fired power stations a month or something, it's like some crazy figure like that, and we're exporting our brown coal to them while
that's
we're
right.
saying, "Oh, we're gonna." It's literally the equivalent of fighting with one hand behind your back, or choosing to condemn people to this cost of living crisis. Like the choices that are being made by people who don't feel the consequences of the choices in the inner city, leafy suburbs, latte, champagne sipping sort of greens slash teal slash that sort of set of people who have the luxury to be able to not drive to work, who have the luxury to be able to pay excessive rates for heating and cooling or whatever it might be. They can bear that burden and they say, oh, well, that's fine. That's a price we're willing to pay. But for a lot of people, it's not a choice to pay it. And the amount they pay in consumption taxes for petrol, in higher energy prices. South Australia, in the recent days, last week there were 2 or 3 periods during the week where South Australia went into price caps for energy because their total energy usage had exceeded what their allotment was. And so we've actually got like price caps, which will lead to supply shortages and rolling blackouts in time, are already happening in South Australia, which is the most renewable exposed part of the Australian energy market. And like, yeah, it's just we are choosing poverty instead of abundance, and we're choosing scarcity instead of prosperity. It's crazy. Like it's self harm fundamentally, for
Yeah.
this cult. Like it's just for a alarmist cult.
It, it's very disingenuous, number one, to call it renewable energy. Like, renewable is either nuclear or hydroelectric. That's the renewable energy out there. Wind turbines and solar, like the blades just from the wind turbines, they can't be recycled. They just sit there. Big hailstorm or something comes and then wipes out a big field of solar panels and stuff. Like, we had a hailstorm up here a couple of years ago, and there's still huge, like, towers of solar panels at the local dump. A- It's just, and then they last what, 20 odd years, and then they need to put a new one up, and the amount of resources that go into the footings for these big turbines and stuff. Like, I understand wanting to look after the environment. I worked on the Great Barrier Reef for 7 years of planted, like I managed a permaculture farm. We had a dirt patch out the back of the house and planted 300 trees in a small area to turn it into a rainforest and stuff. So I'm a huge
That's awesome.
advocate for the environment, but just like the psyop and the gaslighting about this renewable energy and stuff, and especially the conversation in regards to nuclear in this country, it's so
Oh
dangerous. And the
yeah,
cartoons that come out,
backwards. It's so backwards. Like, and you've got like France is building new reactors. Germany's recommissioning them. The US is reinvesting in nuclear energy. Like, it's insane the position we have,
yeah.
and it's totally contra to the direction the rest of the world is heading in.
Uh,
But like what you were saying just before, I was going to say that phenomena you described of looking after the reef and permaculture, all that sort of stuff, that's stewardship by individuals and companies. And if you're working for a tourism operator or you're working for anyone that earns an income or a living off the reef, like I was up there a couple of years ago for my honeymoon at the time, and the Great Barrier Reef is a perfect example of private tour operators essentially taking responsibility for maintaining something they profit from. Like, they've got the most incentive of anyone to ensure that the product they're selling to tourists and locals and all the money it generates for the local economy they're so they say, don't like put your feet down, don't touch the coral, don't touch anything or move anything. Like they're so onto it because they have an incentive to be. They're
That's right.
the and same thing in Victoria's forests, like the shooters and fishers and the campers and hikers, the people who use these natural areas. Sometimes during winter, they're the only ones who will clear a tree or who will report something or fix a fence or stop, degradation of trails or roads or like because they're the only ones there. Parks Victoria aren't out there. And so the people who use the environment and who actually have a relationship and a connection to it are the people who genuinely care about it, not the Greens politicians and councillors who are sitting in air-conditioned offices in inner city Melbourne who wouldn't know what to do. If you drop them off in the middle of the wilderness, they'd be completely lost and panicking, So I just think that example you used of you being someone who genuinely cares about the environment, wants to steward it, like take responsibility for it, not outsource that responsibility to a climate bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's right. I guess, like, I've always cared for the environment, but I guess, like, it really very much aligns with Bitcoin's values of just taking 100% responsibility. We'll go for a walk down to the beach every day, and, like, at a minimum, I'll just make sure I pick up 3 bits of rubbish, whether it's flotsam or debris, a little bits of plastic or whatever's washed up. But it's not hard. And if it's like each individual person is doing it without being dictated that they need to do it, it's just like that's the environment. You want to go upstairs and you don't want your rubbish bins and stuff to be overflowing. You just, you want to throw out the trash, you want to clean up your environment. But if everyone's doing this on their own level, uh, it makes everyone's world a better place. Like we shape our own reality, and collectively we're shaping this world that we're living in here together.
Well, you've just described the difference between bureaucracy and top-down government policy and culture. Like that's the level. The real solution to a lot of these problems is in people not outsourcing and saying, okay, I'm going to pay tax or have tax money taken from someone else to outsource this problem. So I, as an individual, am going to say, well, I don't need to worry about what I can see because I've delegated that moral responsibility and legal responsibility to somebody else. So it's like that's someone else will do that. I've paid tax so that the government will get someone to clean this problem that I can see and could fix myself, but I'm not going to. And that's what we've seen play out in communities as well, where nobody cares for their neighbor or checks in on their neighbor or really makes as much effort to connect within their community anymore, or very often people don't, because they've outsourced that social conscience. They don't really want to know how Joe next door is going, or little old Miss Mary or whatever down the road, like that, because they're like, oh well, someone else is going to do that. That's not my responsibility. That's society's problem. But they're sort of like outsourcing that individual responsibility and opportunity to others. So I think that
I was just going to say, like, on that outsourcing, so like we've outsourced the maintenance of our roads to local council in Australia. Where I live, there's a lot of sealed roads, but there's a lot of dirt roads, ungraded, like unsealed roads that need to be graded and stuff. If there's a huge, massive rain event and the road blows out and it's covered in potholes and stuff, that's not like the only road in the region that needs to be graded, and the council, local government, they've only got so many machines, so they're going to go out and they're going to do the best they can to be able to start getting through them. But it can take 1-2 weeks to grade like a single road, like let alone if there's a couple of hundred roads that need to be graded in that area. But we've outsourced, we've paid our taxes to them, yet a person that lives on a road that may not get graded for another 1 or 2 months, and they've got a young baby and stuff, and it's in potholes, and everyone's just getting shaken about on this horrible road. They are not allowed to, if they have a skid steer, they're not allowed to go out onto that road and fix it themselves. Like, they'll get in trouble, they'll get fined for it, which is absolutely insane. Like, even if they're not asking for any compensation or anything, they're just doing a service for the community, for themselves, for sure. But they're going to get fined and they're going to get in trouble for doing that because we've outsourced the responsibility of our roads to the government. And like, okay, that's one thing. Yes, take care of it. Rates and all that stuff, like that's a whole nother conversation. But then if someone, just because of time and circumstance and stuff, wants to take, say, self-agency for it, they're going to be shut down. And they could be
You're spot on.
persecuted.
Yeah, you're spot on. And it gets to a point where we're outsourcing, but then you become competition if you're the person who's not outsourcing. Like the state actually views you as competition to its remit and authority because, hey, this is what we do. You're not meant to be taking responsibility for that yourself. And that plays out not just at an individual level, like what we're talking about, but plays out in the business sphere as well, where you've got scenarios, and the NBN is the best example of this in two ways.
Are you on
So
Starlink yet?
I know you are. No, so I was for a bit. I'm not now. But yeah, because I just had my home situation changed a bit. But basically, you've got Telstra. Instead of going, you know what, there's areas of coverage that our NBN satellite product or whatever is not sufficient. There's areas we don't have coverage. Let's leave that to the private market or outsource to Elon and say, can you provide coverage for this area? Instead, they're trying to launch their own satellites. Like, it's insane. It's insane. Government is literally taking taxpayer money to compete with a private solution that's already there.
Yeah.
And it's madness. And then the other example, which I didn't even realize, but my mate's in IT and he's really across a lot of like the network, internet infrastructure stuff. He basically, TPG and iiNet, which is a subsidiary of TPG, have their own private cable network, which was previously like cable TV, etc. And they use that to provide an incredibly high speed, high quality internet product that is actually superior to NBN in the areas that network services. So there's a private product that is superior to the NBN that now the NBN is trying to put out of business by offering, it's like 3 years free internet for people with school age kids or something. So they're actually proactively, and they've even said this, that they have to make this offer to try to put this private network out of business in order for the NBN to be viable. So they're aggressively targeting a private solution that is superior to try to take them out of business. So it's like, if most people would go, oh, well, we need the government to do some things because the private market won't provide those things. And you go, okay, if that's true, why do we have the ABC? Why do we have the NBN? Why are we backing all these government horses in private races? It's just crazy. Like, and you realize very quickly when you start asking those questions that actually it's just about the government wanting to be involved in more areas of your life, wanting to essentially just grow and increase and permeate every sphere of private life. I've got a friend of mine who I'm sort of doing a couple of days a week work with him in a social enterprise he's doing. And so I've been spending a little bit of time in the car from time to time. And obviously sitting and spending time in the car with me is probably pretty radicalizing politically. I sort of, I can't really turn it off. You're the same, I'm sure. I'm ground zero for a whole bunch of people who have sort of like red-pilled into libertarian politics, and now increasingly orange-pilled as well. But like, I played this friend in the car the other day, the clip of Klaus Schwab, the former head of the WEF, talking about libertarianism and like ranting about how, libertarians are the anti-system. They want to throw the system down and remove all government influence from private life. And I'm like, 100%. It's the best. It's like guilty, like absolutely accurate. Because you don't need government to be doing things where the private sector will provide. It's just a complete, like by any definition, you don't have to be a hardcore anarcho-capitalist libertarian who believes government is illegitimate and taxes theft to agree that you don't, like, the government has no justification for doing things that it isn't necessary for the government to do.
Yeah. Same. Like, I haven't really thought about it too much. I just take 100% responsibility for myself, my family, and like, you can do that now. You can opt out with Bitcoin, and we do live in a country that is has very like socialist values, and I've benefited off that. Like last year, I was cutting a spray paint tin with an angle grinder, and it blew up in my face like in a big fireball. And like I raced to the hospital and stuff, and it didn't cost me directly a cent, obviously through taxes and stuff. That's all funded. But I drove on a paved road to the hospital. I got amazing treatment. I was in there very quick. I was really looked after, very in depth. They followed up and stuff. Without the government and Big Brother, do you really reckon we're going to have access to those type of services? Or maybe that's where it may not necessarily hospitals, but like the health and hospital service, um, when people are healthy and stuff, they're like, I don't really need that. But so you may not direct money to it. But then when you need it, like it's good to already have that infrastructure there to a high quality. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the first thing to say is that obviously all of that stuff is right at the end of a very long road of really low hanging fruit. So, like, those questions are like the last questions you'd be dealing with because there's so much that is just complete bloat, fat, waste, overlap, or overreach. There's like, so much that could be essentially obliterated or removed overnight that would make no difference to anyone's life. You would never even notice, except that you'd be more free and pay less tax. So there's this huge laundry list of things that you would deal with before you got to that question of health and private solutions to health and all that sort of stuff. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing I would say is that just yesterday, I had my Ballarat branch meeting, which is like my sort of main branch I go to for the Libertarian Party. We were talking about a few different things for like flyers for the community. And what a lot of people don't realize is APRA, who are the sort of head body for doctors and nurses and so forth, like they're like the medical, professional body or whatever. They are basically a protectionist cartel. So like there's massive limits on what nurse practitioners can do. There's massive limits on what chemists can do that they should really be able to provide to the public. So there's a lot of protectionism and a lot of restrictions and limitations on what GPs can provide and do, how many GPs can be in a particular area, how many pharmacies can be in a particular area. The Pharmacy Guild is a huge cartel protectionist racket. Basically, like the Pharmacy Guild will control how many pharmacies can operate within how close to each other. It's a totally controlled market that's not free at all. And essentially, what that means is you're paying more for less products and services that are of lesser quality. So there's a lot of bottlenecks and a lot of restrictions that, yes, we have a good health system that's available and accessible to many Australians. But if you live in the really remote rural areas, that's less true. And if you ever need something outside of hours, or if you ever need, like I was pretty shocked. We lived in Bendigo for a period of time. And in Bendigo, you couldn't get a GP's appointment. Like you couldn't just walk in and see a GP. It was like a 2 or 3 week wait list.
Well,
And in the regional areas, that's most pronounced.
yeah.
The other final thing I would say about health is that I actually think a lot of people point to America and they say, oh, look, there's this example of what a free market in health looks like. And look how bad it is. Look how expensive things are. All this kind of thing. Look how sort of mercenary it is. And what people don't realize is how sort of captured and influenced by lobby groups and regulations. It's the same with the finance system, like the financial system. Wall Street basically writes its own rules. The pharma lobby and big health in America write their own rules. It's the furthest thing from a free market you could imagine. It's just got the dollar tag assigned to it. So, in a truly free market in health, people would go, you know what, I'm pretty young and healthy. I don't necessarily need like the Rolled Gold comprehensive insurance coverage, but I'll absolutely get the minimum coverage to make sure that if something happens to me or my family, it's like the equivalent of a car getting third-party fire and theft, right? If you're driving a car that the value on the car is probably not worth comprehensive insurance, they're just going to write it off and write you a check. If you crash it, you're going to choose car insurance that's appropriate for you, right? So there's no government socialized car insurance, right? That's the equivalent, but that's how you deal with it in a free market for insurance with cars. In health, it would be much the same. If it was a free market, you'd have a lot more providers competing with each other, so prices would be lower. You'd have the risk spread out far more evenly and equitably because the people who have the most risk would be bearing more of the insurance weight, but you would also have a much bigger insurance market than you have now. Because at the moment, there's some marginal tax benefits to private health, and if you want to have a family and stuff, and you want to insure private care when you have a birth and stuff like that. There's some use cases for private health insurance in Australia that make sense now. But fundamentally, the incentives and the way people behave. Also, if people knew that their healthcare wasn't just going to be available to them whenever based on whatever they might do, people would be a lot more careful as well. Like people's behavior would change. The actual incentives to eat well, to train well, to be strong, healthy, all of these things would change. At the moment, and it's subtle and it's really hard to talk about. And a lot of people don't like it when I say this, but like as a qualified personal trainer as well, who's worked with people who are older and keeping into fitness like later in life, I can assure you that most of what we think of as age-related decline is behavioral and nutritional. Like people stop moving and working in certain ways and they lose that capacity and they start drinking and eating and whatever, especially after they retire.
And just sitting, man, for hours a day. But Jordan, I am starting to run out of time. I'm going to hand the stage over to you and just let you wrap up your thoughts. But just a shout out to anyone working in the health hospital services, caring for people. Like nothing against you. We're just talking about the system here. Thank you so much for your service to the Australian population. For anyone that's doing anything of value to anyone else, like thank you so much. You're the salt of the earth. But Jordan, I'm going to bring you up full stage, and if you want to tie your thoughts together and send us off.
Yeah, for sure. I guess if anyone's watching this, I mean, if you're watching this podcast, you probably don't need to be told about Bitcoin and starting to read the books and do the work. But there's so many people who get Bitcoin and understand it in the context of their own life and their own finances, but they don't make that logical leap to how they should interact with the world and the political implications of Bitcoin. And I think that it's easy to be uninterested in politics, but eventually politics will become interested in you. And I think, as I said at the start, the next 10 to 20 years is going to make that only more and more the case. So former Senator Jared Rennick said that you can't eat Bitcoin. Watch this space, because in the next month or two, I'm going to be doing something really fun around that to maybe show that's not the case. But be curious, get engaged, try to seek out, political representatives and organizations that represent your interests and reflect the values of your community and your family. And if you haven't yet, follow me on @Dittloff4, the number 4. So Dittloff 4 cents across all platforms. So YouTube, X, Instagram, TikTok, that's the handle everywhere now. So give me a follow and see if you agree with or are interested by my ideas.
I absolutely love it. For the audience, I'll put all Jordan's contact details below, so you can find that in the description. If you want more information about learning about a Bitcoin self-managed super fund or taking your security to the next level, just go to gdaybitcoin.com. You'll find all those resources there. Jordan, thank you so much for your time this morning. For the audience, please do something nice for yourself today. For somebody else out there, be blessed. Peace.